The beast, my pride and joy, a massive offset smoker I'd lovingly restored, was purring like a dragon dreaming of brisket. Inside? Oh, just 12 hours into a relationship with a USDA prime packer brisket hitting that perfect, frustrating, glorious stall. Beside it, racks of St. Louis ribs glistened like pirate treasure under a careful mop of my secret weapon sauce. The smell! Forget your fancy French perfumes. This was intoxicating, primal, holy. Friends were scattered around the patio, beers in hand, eyes glazed over with barbecue anticipation. Life was good. Until he appeared. Theodore Sterling III, my neighbor, my nemesis, peering over the pristine white vinyl fence that separated his meticulously manicured and utterly soulless patch of green from my slightly wilder, infinitely more delicious-smelling domain. His nose wrinkled as if he'd just sniffed artisanal sewage. He held up his phone, probably running some kind of offensive odor detection app he'd coded himself. "Afternoon, Ted," I called out, offering a cheerful wave dripping with barbecue sauce and sarcasm. "Smells good, right?" He just glared, a look that could curdle milk, then retreated back into his climate-controlled, joy-vacuumed house. I swear I could feel the property values quivering in fear of my delicious smoke. The other shoe dropped Monday evening. Not a letter this time, but a personal delivery. Mr. Abernathy, our perpetually flustered HOA president, stood on my doorstep clutching a certified envelope like it contained radioactive waste. He avoided eye contact. Never a good sign. "Hank," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Got another complaint, formal one, about the, you know." He gestured vaguely towards my backyard. I took the envelope, tore it open. Standard HOA boilerplate leading up to the kill shot. Numerous complaints received regarding excessive smoke and unpleasant odors emanating from Lot 12. Numerous, Sterling had complained 3 times that weekend. That's not numerous, that's obsessive. Violation of Bylaw 12C, restrictions on outdoor cooking appliances. A vague, catch-all rule, probably written by someone whose idea of barbecue was microwaving a hot dog. Homeowner is hereby directed to cease and desist all large-scale smoking activities, and strongly urged to replace the offending apparatus with a modest, gas-powered grilling unit. My blood pressure spiked. My vision tunneled. "Cease and desist?" I choked out, waving the letter. "Replace the beast? With a gas grill? Abernathy, are you hearing this? That's like telling Michelangelo to ditch the Sistine Chapel ceiling and just paint the garden shed beige. It's barbecue." Abernathy flinched. "Hank, please. Sterling is insistent. He's documenting everything. He claims the smoke triggers his delicate respiratory sensitivities." "Delicate?" I scoffed. "The only thing delicate about Sterling is his ego. His sensitivities only seem to flare up when my brisket hits the 12-hour mark. This is harassment." "Just try to work with him, Hank," Abernathy pleaded, already backing away towards the sidewalk. "For the sake of neighborhood harmony?" Neighborhood harmony could kiss my smoky butt. Later, Deb tried the voice of reason approach. "Hank, honey, maybe you could just use less wood? Or only smoke on alternate Tuesdays during a lunar eclipse? Sterling's a pain, but is fighting the HOA really worth it?" Fighting wasn't the plan. Winning was. I tried talking to Sterling directly. Found him polishing his already gleaming Lexus in his driveway. "Ted," I said, trying to keep the smoke out of my voice, figuratively speaking. "Come on, man, it's barbecue. People like it. Can't we find a compromise?" He paused his polishing, turned to me with the smug condescension of a minor feudal lord. "Murphy," he said, his voice clipped, "your hobby constitutes a public nuisance under Section 14, Paragraph 7. The persistent olfactory assault is unacceptable. The bylaws are clear. Remove the offending device or face further sanctions. He went back to polishing, dismissing me. Offending device? Olfactory assault? Oh, it was so on. That night, surrounded by takeout pizza, the irony wasn't lost on me. I wasn't just mad. I was inspired. I dove into the labyrinthine depths of the HOA/CC and ours, but this time I cross-referenced them with city and county zoning ordinances, business licenses, home occupation permits, cottage food laws, health codes. And then I found it. A forgotten relic. A weird zoning overlay on my specific block, dating back to the 70s when this area was less manicured suburbia and more random houses near a highway. It allowed for limited home-based commercial activity, with proper permitting, something the HOA bylaws couldn't technically override if city-county approved it. Restrictions on personal barbecue? Maybe. Restrictions on a licensed food business operating under a specific zoning variance? That was a whole different kettle of smoked fish. The idea hit me like a full rack of ribs dropped from a great height. It was certifiably insane. It was probably financial ruin waiting to happen. It was, without a doubt, the single most beautiful, petty, and potentially delicious idea I'd ever had. I strode into the living room. Deb was trying to watch some home renovation show, probably dreaming of neutral color palettes. I stood before her, holding a shaker of my signature rebellion rub, eyes blazing with maniacal purpose. "Deb," I announced, my voice trembling with revolutionary fervor. "Honey, sweetheart, apple of my eye." She muted the TV, eyeing me warily. "Okay, Hank, what did you buy now? Another smoker?" "No, better! I figured out how to fight Sterling, how to fight the HOA, how to win." "By writing a strongly worded letter?" she asked hopefully. "By leaning in," I declared. "They hate the smoke. They think it's a nuisance. Fine. What if it's not a hobby? What if it's a business?" Her eyes widened. "A business? Hank, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking barbecue, real barbecue, for sale, right here!" I gestured wildly around our perfectly normal suburban living room. "Delivery, catering, a weekend pop-up smokehouse, right out of the garage." Deb stared at me as if I'd just suggested we pave the lawn and install a flaming monster truck jump. "You want to open a restaurant? Hank, have you completely lost your ever-loving mind? In our backyard? The HOA will literally explode! Sterling will have an aneurysm!" "Exactly," I grinned, shaking the rib rub like a maraca of defiance. "Let him. They hate the smoke from my hobby. Wait till they get a whiff of Hank's Smokehouse Rebellion. It's not just barbecue anymore, Deb. It's freedom barbecue." Operation Permit Storm commenced immediately. Forget low and slow. This was a full-speed, high-heat, bureaucratic cook. My days became a blur of zoning maps spread across the dining table, my nights illuminated by the glow of online permit applications. My IT skills, usually employed debugging soul-crushing corporate software, were repurposed to navigate the labyrinthine city and county websites. Cut. Hank on the phone, charming a skeptical clerk. Think of it as a micro-culinary enterprise. Cut. Hank at the county health department, patiently explaining his sanitation plan, involving lots of bleach and the garage sink. Cut. Hank highlighting the ancient zoning overlay map for Janice Lee at the city planning office. "See, right here, Home Occupation Overlay Zone B. Clear as day." Cut? Janice shrugging, stamping a provisional permit with a bemused smile. Cut. Hank sprinting out of the building, permits clutched like Willy Wonka's golden ticket, just as a sleek sedan carrying what looks suspiciously like the HOA's lawyer pulls into the parking lot. Close up on Hank's triumphant grin. Rule 1 of barbecue and bureaucracy. If you can't convince 'em, confuse 'em. and always move faster than the lawyers. With permits, mostly in hand, the real chaos began. My backyard transformed from a suburban oasis into a construction zone fueled by spite and smoked meat dreams. My neighbor, Smokey Pete Kowalski, a retired welder with forearms like oak branches and a deep, abiding hatred for Theodore Sterling III, showed up bright and early the first weekend, tools in hand. "Heard you were sticking it to Sterling, Hank," Pete boomed, clapping me on the back hard enough to realign my spine. "Count me in. What needs welding? What needs building? Let's make some beautiful, regulation-bending magic." Together, we were a whirlwind of questionable construction. We built a covered smoking area using salvaged lumber and Pete's creative welding techniques. Then came the new hardware. If they hated the beast, they were going to loathe its bigger, badder siblings. A commercial-grade smoker, the size of a small car, arrived on a flatbed. Getting it into the backyard involved Pete, me, 3 borrowed come-alongs, a lot of swearing, and a terrifying near miss with Sterling's prize-winning bird bath, which, tragically, survived. The garage became command central, prep kitchen, serving counter. Stainless steel tables appeared. Commercial refrigerators hummed aggressively. The dreaded 3-compartment sink was installed, requiring plumbing modifications that Pete assured me were probably up to code. Mostly. Every delivery, every power tool whine, every clang of metal brought Sterling to his window, phone camera documenting our every move. Deb watched the mounting credit card bills, her expression oscillating between panic and grudging admiration for my sheer audacity. "Hank," she said one evening, staring at the half-finished chaos, "this looks less like a restaurant and more like a Mad Max catering company." "Exactly," I grinned. "Rustic charm." Sterling and the HOA didn't take this lying down. The official letters escalated. "Cease and desist construction," I countered with copies of my permits. "Notice of daily fines for unapproved commercial activity." I countered with polite letters citing my pending final inspections and legal right to operate under the zoning overlay. Then Sterling got personal. Construction noise complaints filed precisely 1 minute after the allowed weekend start time. His sprinklers malfunctioning and soaking our lumber pile. A mysterious flat tire on the concrete delivery truck that was supposed to pour the new smoker pad. We worked faster, harder, fueled by coffee and righteous indignation. We built makeshift dams against his water assault. I parked my truck strategically to ensure deliveries got through. Heated words were exchanged over the fence, Sterling sputtering about bylaws, me grinning and asking if he wanted to pre-order some ribs. The battle lines were drawn. Finally, it was time. Saturday morning. Before dawn, I lit the fires. Not just the beast, but the new behemoth smoker, too. The sheer volume of smoke rolling into the sky was breathtaking. Possibly neighborhood choking, definitely statement-making. Prep was frantic. Deb, surprisingly efficient now that it was real, organized the slaw station and took charge of condiments. Pete, wearing a slightly too small "kiss the cook, seriously do it" apron, was my brisket-slicing wingman. Friends and curious, or brave, neighbors started arriving around noon, drawn by the heavenly aroma that now blanketed a 3-block radius. I threw open the garage door, revealing our makeshift counter. "Hank's Smokehouse Rebellion is open," I yelled, maybe a little too loudly. The first order came in, then another, then a flood. It was pure, unadulterated chaos. Me, plating pulled pork sandwiches like a machine, shouting orders to Pete. Deb, wrestling with the square reader on her phone, making change, trying to keep the line moving. Pete, running food out, charming the customers, occasionally starting minor grease fires, quickly extinguished. The line snaked down the driveway, onto the sidewalk, down the street. People were laughing, eating, dripping sauce. It was beautiful. Across the street, Sterling stood like a statue of impotent rage, phone held high, documenting the joyous, smoke-filled anarchy. He was probably calling the police, the fire department, the National Guard. I didn't care. We were doing it. We were actually doing it. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Bull. Revenge is a dish best served smoked low and slow for 14 hours, piled high on a cheap bun, and sold right under the nose of the guy who tried to shut you down. And man, did it taste sweet! The soft opening wasn't a fluke. Hank's Smokehouse rebellion became the weekend destination. Every Saturday and Sunday was a beautiful nightmare. Lines formed before we even opened. We sold out of brisket by 2 p.m., ribs by 3. The smokers ran constantly, billowing fragrant defiance. It was pure action. Me, juggling fire management across 3 smokers, slicing meat with the focus of a brain surgeon, shouting, "Order up!" Deb, a multitasking whirlwind, handling the cash box, calming hangry customers, fielding questions about allergens, is the smoke gluten-free, and occasionally shooting death glares towards Sterling's house. Pete, bless his greasy heart, was everywhere. Hauling wood, saucing ribs, telling bad jokes, somehow keeping morale high even when we ran out of pulled pork. We had regulars. We had newcomers drawn by word of mouth, or just following the smoke. We even had a local food blogger show up one Saturday, snapping photos and asking intense questions about my rub recipe while I was trying to prevent a major flare-up in the beast. Sterling, meanwhile, escalated his campaign, submitting weekly dossiers of alleged violations, traffic congestion, illegal parking, excessive decibels of happy chatter, to the HOA and the city. Then came Judgment Day, or rather, Judgment Days. First, Janice Lee from zoning. She walked the perimeter, clipboard in hand, measuring setbacks, checking my customer area, the patio, verifying my permit against the glorious chaos unfolding during peak lunch rush. I talked fast, emphasizing limited hours, home occupation, community culinary enrichment. She gave me a wry smile. "You certainly found a loophole, Mr. Murphy. Just try to keep the line off Mrs. Gable's petunias." She signed off, provisionally. 1 down. Next, Frank Dempsey, County Health Inspector. This was the big one. Frank looked like he'd gargled nails for breakfast. He didn't smile. He prowled through my garage kitchen like a hawk, checked fridge temps, scrutinized my hand-washing technique, swabbed surfaces, questioned my meat sourcing, demanded to see my temperature logs. I answered every question, produced every document, scrubbed every surface until my knuckles bled. Pete helpfully tried to explain the sanitizing properties of wood smoke to Frank, who was unamused. Sterling lurked nearby, trying to point out obvious contamination risks, like Pete's apron. After what felt like an eternity, Frank grunted. "Temperatures are good. Sanitation protocols? Adequate for now. Fix that gap under the garage door by tomorrow. You pass, barely." Relief washed over me so hard, I nearly collapsed. But Sterling wasn't done. The HOA lawsuit landed with a thud, seeking a permanent injunction to shut down the illegal commercial enterprise disruptive to residential tranquility. We ended up in mediation first. Me, Deb, and Pete, as my chief engineer, versus Sterling, Abernathy, and a slick HOA lawyer who kept mispronouncing brisket. It was verbal combat. The lawyer droned about bylaws and property values. Sterling raged about noxious fumes and riff-raff customers. I countered with my permits, the zoning overlay, pictures of my happy customers, and a passionate defense of barbecue as a fundamental human right. Pete kept interrupting to talk about smoker airflow dynamics. We refused to budge. Mediation failed spectacularly. A court date was set, which led us to the climax. We decided to go big. A Community Appreciation Day / Final Stand BQ. We advertised it discreetly, spread the word, fired up everything. Pete arranged for his buddy's bluegrass band to play, loudly, on the driveway. The lines were insane. The smell was glorious. It was peak barbecue pandemonium, right at the height of the lunch rush. As the band was mid-banjo solo, two things happened simultaneously. 1. A courier arrived with an envelope, the judge's preliminary ruling. 2. Sterling, his face purple with rage, stormed across his lawn and onto my driveway, heading straight for the main power breaker for the Smokers' fans. "This ends now, Murphy!" he shrieked over the music. What happened next was a blur. Pete, seeing Sterling heading for the power, dropped a rack of ribs and executed a surprisingly agile, barbecue sauce-fueled body block, sending Sterling stumbling back into his own prize-winning, and thankfully thornless, rose bushes. The crowd gasped, then cheered. Deb intercepted the courier, tearing open the envelope. At the same time, Frank Dempsey, the health inspector, reappeared for a surprise follow-up inspection, his face grim amidst the chaos. Hank had to juggle, directing Pete away from throttling Sterling, serving the next customer, keeping an eye on Frank inspecting the brisket temperature, and trying to read the legal document Deb was waving frantically. Deb finally deciphered the legalese. "Hank, we won." Mostly, judge denied the immediate injunction, says the permits appear valid pending full trial, but we have to limit hours and install a smoke mitigation stack. Frank Dempsey nodded curtly. "Temps are holding. Looks surprisingly clean, considering." He scribbled on his clipboard. "Just keep the crowd contained." He gave Sterling, still tangled in his roses, a look of profound annoyance and left. Sterling, defeated, enraged, and covered in rose petals, finally extracted himself and retreated, muttering threats about appeals and property value destruction. The crowd erupted in cheers. The band launched into a triumphant, fast-paced fiddle tune. We'd held the line. Weeks later, an uneasy peace settled. The lawyers were still lawyering, but the immediate threat was gone. We installed the smoke mitigation stack, basically a ridiculously tall chimney extension on the main smoker, painted bright red just to annoy Sterling further. We adhered to slightly restricted hours, but Hank's Smokehouse rebellion was alive and smoking. Sterling put his house up for sale, claimed the air quality was detrimental to his delicate constitution. Good riddance. Mr. Abernathy avoided me, but sometimes I'd catch him sniffing the air wistfully from his own yard. The Smokehouse became a local legend. A slightly crazy, probably shouldn't be legal legend, but a legend nonetheless. People came from miles around for the brisket. Deb designed T-shirts. I survived the HOA BBQ wars. Pete became a minor local celebrity. I stood by the beast one quiet evening, watching the thin ribbon of smoke curl into the twilight sky from the top of the absurdly tall new stack. Deb came out, shaking her head, but smiling. "You're certifiably insane, you know that?" "Maybe," I grinned, handing her a perfectly smoked rib. "But the barbecue's good, right?" She took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. "It's ridiculously good, Hank. That's all that matters." I looked toward Sterling's now darkened house, then back at my smoker. Freedom smells a lot like hickory smoke and slow-cooked pork. What's next? Catering? Bottling the sauce? Maybe perfecting that Carolina vinegar mop? Yeah, definitely the vinegar mop. The rebellion continues.